Hello, welcome to today's edition of the Academy. Today we're going to kind of revisit the topic we were discussing last time, essentially area denial via firepower. Now the reason we're doing this is that the last time we did it, we focused on what I would call relatively simple aspects of using firepower for area denial. And I use 40K as an example, as far as the models and the layout of the table. But the reality is there are a lot of game systems that have other game mechanics that can be leveraged for the same purpose. And I wanted to deal with a couple of those specifically that 40K just doesn't have as an example. So if you think of it, last week was more of a general firepower discussion. This will be a little more specific, dealing with two rule types that may very well come into play in several other game systems that you can use to your advantage. So let's head on down to the battlefield and we'll see what we can learn.
Hello, welcome to the game shop. Alright, so we're at the table now. This is kind of just a war game scenario. All I have right now are British, so you're going to see some British on British demonstration here in my discussions. Alright, so to kind of recap from the last episode on area denial, we talked, well, last two episodes, we talked about positional, and we also talked about firepower. Today the positional one doesn't really change anything. It doesn't matter what system you're using, but firepower, I think it bears a second video talking in terms of bolt action. Now, I'm using bolt action because that's what I'm familiar with, but the game system itself has some concepts in it that may apply to several other games, especially where you're able to pre-designate actions on your units or pre-designate the arrival of some firepower. In bolt action, you have artillery observers, not airstrike, and I'm not talking air observers here, but I'm talking about actual forward artillery observers. And you have the ambush order. Both of these are effective at using firepower as an area denial element. And I'd like to kind of show you those as an example. Okay, there's examples of how to use that. And then at the end we'll talk about how you can use the forward air observer kind of in the same way. So let's kind of start first looking at the simple one, the ambush order, because that's really pretty intuitive. Okay, so let's just look at the table overall. All right, nice, simple little town with a crossroads. British units on this side. There's a 6-pounder looking its way down the road. Just happened to be there. Now, to be honest, I set this board up for a whole different reason and just happened to be able to use it. It was a perfect shot for this. This was not planned. But it goes to show you there are often situations where you can find on a given table areas where you can use some of these tactics pretty well. So this unit has a 45-degree arc of fire, so he's got everything covered between those two buildings. That's quite a bit of table space that the opponent will have to move through. So if he was to be given an ambush order, which is an order that allows you to, as an enemy unit is moving in arc, in line of sight, within range. Of course, you can't pre-measure range, but just within line of sight and within your arc, you can force them to stop at a certain point and then take a shot at them. So when this 6-pounder is on ambush, the enemy knows that this area is a high-risk zone. So regardless of what he brings through here, you could shoot at it. Now, in bolt action, you actually have to designate whether a gun like this will be firing an anti-tank round or an HE round. So that will dissuade him from moving one unit type or another. If it's an HE round, he probably won't be moving trucks or infantry through. If it's an AP round, he probably won't be moving vehicles through. Now, so let's take a look at how this would play out. If I have an ambush order die on our friend here, the 6-pounder, I've got a long lane in which to fire. My opponent has a tank he wishes to move into that zone. Now, in this particular circumstance, these orchards are line of sight. They do impact line of sight as far as being light cover, but they don't block it. They're not dense terrain where you can't see through it. So this tank is visible to the AT gun. If it moves, the ambush can fire. So at this point, I have just used firepower to limit this tank's mobility. The tank has to decide whether he wants to risk the shot or not. Now he's going to weigh in, what is the range, what are the odds of hitting, what's the cover I've got, and what do I really need to do. Now, he may decide not to move and simply fire, but that's, again, you're limiting the opponent's options. That's the whole point of area denial using firepower. You're denying him free use of this road, okay? Because if he does get to this road, let's say he's over here, he gets to that road, or if he's on it, he can move very quickly. In bolt action, roads allow double movement. So instead of being limited to 9 inches in firing, he can move 18 inches. That's quite a bit of distance. But again, if he moves at all, he can be shot. That is a risk that he needs to assess now. So you're depriving him of freedom of movement. That's the whole point, right? Similarly, I can use a sniper, which I'm going to call it, I have a sniper here. He's going to be in this building, window right here. And he can basically come in, looking out that window on the top floor, he can essentially see most of the board. He can see down this side of the table up to this building. He can see from the edge of the building all the way over to this side of the table into those hills. So anyone who moves, any infantry who moves, or open top vehicle that moves in that area will be subject to a shot from a sniper, which could put a pin on him. So he has to think about the risk before he actually moves anything in that space. I have now, again, because there's an ambush order on a sniper, I have denied him the ability to move in those areas. Now, even if the ambush wasn't there, or the ambush wasn't on the 6-pounder, the presence of that unit in the area, like we discussed in the previous episode on firepower, just its presence dissuades action. But here, because the ambush order allows me to interrupt the opponent's move, I am limiting his actions. Now, we can do the same thing with an artillery request. So I've got my observer here in this building. He's got a window on the far side. Anything he can see, any point on the table he can see, he can call a strike on. Now, that's not such a big deal. In the early part of the turn, you would think. However, think in terms of this. So for those of you who are not familiar, bolt action, an artillery strike works in this manner. I'll just go ahead and use an empty space on the table here. You pick a spot that your spotter can see, and that's where an artillery barrage will begin at the beginning of the next turn, before any order dice are drawn, before anyone moves. And the radius is 6 inches plus d6 inches, so it's a minimum of 7-inch radius. That's a 14-inch diameter circle. Of course, there's a chance it could miss. It could scatter, I'm sorry. But it scatters d3 inches randomly. It also can be delayed. So it's not a guarantee, but there's a 50% chance that it's coming in. Actually, it's a 66% chance it's coming in. 50% chance it's actually coming in where he wants. Now here's what that means. So if I put this down at the beginning of a turn, let's say I place it down here near this infantry unit. Let's put that there. All right, this serves two purposes. The first one is the opponent knows that I'm going to be striking that point. Now he has some choices to make. There's a tank sitting here who wants to move up the road. He knows that might come in. So let's see what this could mean. All right. I placed those dice at 7 inches away from the center of that marker. 50% of the chance at the beginning of the next turn. This is where the units are going to be hit, or potentially hit by this barrage. They will take pins or they could be hit and take serious damage. So, just with what's on the table right now, we have a tank that's safe, but if he moves his normal road movement, it would put him in the middle of this. In order for him to avoid that but still advance, he would need to run, which means he can't shoot. So using my firepower, I have forced the opponent here to decide to either move the tank a short distance, which is risky because remember it's a D6 plus 6. So this is the minimum size. The maximum size can be 12 inches. So it is entirely possible that this can actually come out to here. So if my opponent decides to move this tank any further than this, there is a chance he's going to get hit or affected by the barrage. The closer he moves to this point, the more likely it is. Once he gets in that circle, he's guaranteed to be affected. He'll need to run past that circle and again make it 5 inches further. So he needs to make it all the way past this point here, which is, unfortunately for him, going to be difficult. Let's measure out 36 inches and see where he would have to end up to ensure he didn't get hit. All right, so unfortunately for him, a maximum distance move here would force him here. Unfortunately, to be honest with you, with a tank, he wouldn't be able to do that pivot. So he would be stuck here. There is no way for him to run past this. That means he is extremely limited in his mobility. He will have to stay back here or move really no further than that. That really limits his freedom of movement, simply because he knows a barrage is coming down here and will more than likely land. Now this unit is already in the blast radius, and this lieutenant here is almost assuredly, he's right outside the blast radius. He's 8 inches away, but if the D6 roll is a 2 or more, which is pretty likely, he's also within. So now the opponent does not have freedom to stay put. He's forced to move. Moving in bolt action impacts your shooting unless you're using submachine guns or you're American. So that forces the opponent to move if he wants to avoid damage. Firepower was just used to deny access to this space by the opponent. Very, very important. Now, similarly, another way to think about this is what if the opponent had reserves? Let me show you this perspective. Okay, so my spotter can also see that point over there on the corner of the table. If he selects this open space where there's no units, except on a very, very lucky roll, maybe he could get this squad. But I think I need to roll a 12. I don't even think I can get there. So this squad isn't even going to be hit by that. The whole purpose of this placement is area denial. If I've got an opponent with units in reserve, and I have a flank that I want to protect, or potentially force him onto something more dangerous, such as a 6-pounder and a tank gun with an ambush die on it, I'm likely going to be able to use this because now he's definitely not going to advance his infantry on this part of the table. Matter of fact, 12 inches from here is the maximum range of this, so I could easily pick up any infantry that advanced here, and definitely ones that ran, potentially over to here. His vehicle can't do much here behind this. Here he's obstructed by quite a bit. He will only be able to advance over these. He's very slow. Here he's blocked by that building, limiting his firepower, his projection of fire power. So here is his option. Problem is, if he comes in on this part of the table, the anti-tank gun's ready for him. So I'm denying him both areas. I'm forcing him to make a decision based on 2 threats now. Does he risk getting pinned and potentially destroyed by a lucky barrage hit? Or does he risk the anti-tank gun to get him onto the road to be able to do something well with the tank? Or does he just, I'll say be cowardly, a little unfair there, but and hide behind the building, safe from those threats? So again, using ambush and an artillery barrage strike into a zone where the opponent could bring units on, you deprive the ability of the movement, or you basically deprive the opponent of the freedom of movement. That's the whole point. You're doing it with firepower. All right, so that's our, I guess, a third part of our Academy series dealing with area denial. I hope that it's helped you kind of put into perspective some other approaches in some other game systems potentially, and I hope you learn from it and are able to apply it to the tabletop to your success. So go ahead and comment below, share, like, and subscribe if you haven't already, and click that notification bell if you want to be made aware of the next time I upload a video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.